What's up, my Yugi Bros? I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0. Welcome to Casual Friday at like 9:30 at night. I know you're probably going to be getting this on a Saturday for the vast majority of my subscribers. Also, you may notice that I am once again still using a suboptimal camera. I am actually currently using two cameras because I'm not certain if my phone camera is going to die partway through this, because it did last time, and so I'm actually kind of looking at two cameras in case one of them dies at some point. I'm in an interesting predicament. Anyway, I am actually coming to you this late tonight, and I have not been filming videos this week because I have been in a world of doom and gloom. Not actually for the reason you would probably think by having expressed before that I was a Hillary supporter. Well, kind of, indirectly. In some ways. Not really. Well, it's because I've been studying climate change. I have been working on my senior thesis, and I have been doing a lot of studies into the reason why we cannot be bothered to give a damn and do anything about kind of the world's biggest crisis ever. Like, that sounds like hyperbole, but as some of the economic estimates that I've been reading are actually truly horrifying. Anyway, but that's the reason why I have been fairly absent from YouTube this week, is just because this particular research paper has been whooping my ass. Also, being a politics nerd, I did kind of lose 2 days to the election, so I've had to make up for that with a lot of extra time. But I am getting to you now. I once again do not have anything to open or any special things except for a couple of channel-related announcements this week. The first one of those channel-related announcements is the fact that I am going to be starting to try out a new camera. It is not actually a new camera, it's one I've had around for a while, but I just realized that it can take actually fairly decent video. I'm going to be trying to pick up a tripod in the near future, but I will be experimenting with, I don't remember what the camera is called, but it is basically a point-and-shoot still camera that does fairly nice HD video. So I am finally going to have a decent camera that doesn't make me look like death. The next is that I am actually changing up the format of my Casual Fridays, and I will be announcing that in a bigger channel announcement tomorrow, but it has to do with the fact that I feel like a lot of these questions are good enough that they could be talked about in their own videos. I'll get to that more in detail in the future, but I want to get to your Q&A. Let's begin with, oh dear. Let's begin with Muhammad Aziz, who asks, what would be your best way to hit BA PK decks? The majority of hate seems to be directed towards Dante as a starter card, but considering the recent success of pure Phantom Knight strategies, would it be logical to think that Silent Boot / Fogblade might also hit the ban list? And do you think that if Dante goes to 1, Beatrice can go back to 3? He says he's a bit biased because he's really into Beatrice Turbo. My personal hit was yes. I would hit Dante. Dante would be the first hit because that's the BA part. Without Dante, BAs don't really have a lot going for them. However, the other thing that I think that Konami is liable to hit is the Speedroid engine. Takatom Borg and Terrortop, I think, are the real problems in making BA PK such a difficult deck to get rid of. It's between that and Dante that I think are going to be the real problems. I think if you get rid of that, like, the deck is still going to be decent, but it's not going to be the unkillable tier 1 deck that it's been for a while. YG Otale asks a very, very complex looking question. Basically what it boils down to is the fact that Pot of Avidity is basically an automatic side-in Game 2 for ABCs, and he asks that given that it's an automatic side deck, is it a good side deck, since you are liable to be taking out good cards in order to use it in fear of getting hit with Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries? And my response to that is, in theory, that would make sense, but if you think about it practically, the side deck is not necessarily about, like, taking out things you need from your deck in order to put in things you don't need for your deck, but you need to beat your opponent's deck. The side deck is, once again, about optimization. You are taking out the things that are in your deck that you think are going to be the least helpful against the deck that you are currently working with for the cards that you think will be the most helpful for playing against it. And so the reason why Pot of Avidity is good in the side is because you can basically guarantee that your opponent is going to be running something that will leave your machine monsters banished, whether it is Buster Dragon or whether it is all of your smaller ABC monsters. you are going to be afraid that somebody is going to banish them, or that they are going to keep them banished. That's a fairly logical fear. However, the reason why it's in the side deck is because then, instead of having to take out main combo pieces or things that you know are going to be useful against most decks, you are going to be able to take out the things that are least useful against the matchup that you're currently against. And so that's why I think that Pot of Avidity is a good side deck card, despite the fact that you are constantly having to side it anyway. Garlic XLR, that's quite a name, asks, question, is there a chance of Konami limiting terraforming with all the new add 1x when activating field spell? They basically just made another upstart. I think you mean Rhoda? I don't know. Anyway, also, do you think Konami will or can do anything against side decking of kaiju? So the question number one, I think that terraforming is a decent limit. I think that that would make a lot of sense, since field spells have tended to be extremely good recently in the archetypes in which they're really good. You know, you're going to be playing decks or field spells in decks for which they are particularly good. Oh, this is really redundant. Anyway, the decks that have been using field spells have been using OP field spells. Things like Majesty's Pegasus or Union Hanger, and I think for those decks it does make sense to limit terraforming. The decks that don't use field spells are the ones that don't really need the field spell, and so I think that limiting terraforming is indeed a good option. As far as dealing with kaiju side decking, I think that the answer to people who side deck kaijus is to make the game more interactive. Stop focusing on floodgate monsters. Stop focusing on things like Tree Toad and ABC Dragon Buster and Cyber Dragon Infinity, these cards that you put on the board to stop your opponent from playing Yu-Gi-Oh! These monsters. I think that that is the role of back row, specifically traps, and therefore I think that if Konami wants to deal with the fact that kaiju are in the meta, they have to start making decks that aren't necessarily hurt by kaiju. They would have to actually limit every single kaiju before people would stop side decking kaiju. Ben SX asks, Stratos, you know the question. Yes, I know the question, and no, I don't think it's coming back. You don't seem to understand, or maybe you understand, but like, a lot of people don't seem to understand the fact that Stratos is not once per turn. It isn't a hard once per turn, and it is not just when it's normal summoned and not just when it's special summoned. It is as many times during your turn as you can summon Stratos, and so in order to make Stratos a card that we allow back in the game, you have to limit basically everything else that makes Heroes a good and interesting deck. It then just becomes Stratos Turbo. I think that Stratos is actually bad for hero decks because it requires Konami to limit the versatility of the deck in order to allow Stratos into the game. Marcos Cardenas asks, what are your thoughts on the Felgrand Kaiju deck right now? I think that the Felgrand Kaiju deck is really interesting. It was doing fairly well. I mean, it topped like 2 regionals a few formats ago, but I think the problem with it is that in order to beat ABC, it seems to have to go first. Now, you might say, well, that it has Kaiju, but the thing is that it generates advantage reactively. It has to put things into the graveyard, and therefore it's a very, very slow deck. Something that ABC can deal with easily, and especially Metal Foes. Metal Foes have a very easy time at, first of all, recovering from opponents' plays, but also at making opponents who slow roll their plays really hurt. So I think that while the deck has some really good plays to it, I think the current meta is really not conducive to it being successful. Team Super Sue asks how I think Dimension Barrier will affect the meta. That's really interesting. I think that Dimensional Barrier is not necessarily going to affect the meta so much as it's going to affect games. Players are going to, flip the Dimension Barrier, and if the other player, can't respond in time for the opponent to, wreck them afterwards, I think that they're going to scoop up their cards. I don't think there is really a way for the meta to compensate for Dimensional Barrier other than slowing down in order to be able to compensate for the fact that people are playing, but they're still going to be playing the same decks. I think it's just we are going to see a slower format. Frank King asks, will you be doing Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro live streams after the semester ends? Also, do you play any card games released by Bushiroad? I have never heard of Bushiroad. I play a few tabletop kind of boxed card games, but not very frequently. And other than that, basically, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic are the only competitive card games that I know how to play, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the only one that I really play. As for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro question, I have been playing around on Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro a lot recently. I may just start streaming it just for funsies at some point. It has been wasting my time anyway, so I might as well stream it for y'all. Moving on, Ghost Trick Knight asks, if you could pick any deck of the past to get quote-unquote legacy support, what would it be and why? There isn't really, because legacy support really seems to refer to archetypes, and there aren't really any archetypes that I want to see get legacy support. I mean, I really like Thunder Family, but I think just the strategy as a whole is no longer viable, and so, you know, it's not something that I could see. I feel like legacy support would be wasted on it. The other decks that I really want, that I want to see, or that I like, that I really want to see come back, are decks that are non-archetypal or multi-archetypal, such as something like, I would say, Teledad, or like Chainbeat. Those are the kinds of things that I would like to see get more support in the near future, but like those aren't archetypal decks. The thing that I really want to see support for, namely things coming off the ban list, is Dragon Rulers. I may be a little bit too gung-ho for the day when Dragon Rulers come back off the list. Along the same lines, A. Jemison, oh wait, he has a pronunciation. Yeah, A. Jemison. Do you think that Konami will continue the Gen 1 legacy support as they have with the additional cards for Blue Eyes, etc.? Or will we eventually see reworks or retrains of all the anime popular archetypes? He mentions Heroes and Ojamas and Blackwings. I think that Konami is fairly done with Heroes, but I keep thinking that, and it's never true. Oh, it looks like I am going to be using my computer because my iPod just stopped recording. Let's just turn that off for a second. Anyway, I think, yeah, I keep thinking that Heroes are going to stop getting support, and it just never turns out to be true. I think that they are going to continue giving various archetypes, old archetypes, support. I think it's going to be much more sporadic than it has been recently. I think it's just they've been going in waves, kind of. But I don't see all of them getting support again. And he also asks what my favorite one is, or what I think the best one is. I mean, I love Blue Eyes. I think it's a really interesting, like, it's a very skillful looking deck. It's obviously the most successful one, although Dark Magician is bouncing back. And so, I mean, of them, I think that Blue Eyes is the most fun and interesting. I mean, you gotta love Blue Eyes. Noah Reyes asks, as somebody who just came back to the game after your hiatus, what are some of the things that you dislike about this format or like about this format versus the Duelist Alliance slash Necros format? I don't like the amount. So there is interaction in this current game, but the thing I don't like about the interaction in the meta right now is that it is always a blowout one way or the other. Like, you have to have like very specific conditions to get a really decent set of interaction, and it's basically both decks not doing what they are supposed to do. If one of the decks does what it's supposed to do, and then the other deck responds the way that it's supposed to, then it turns out to be a blowout. And if one of the decks, you know, starts off and does well, does what it's supposed to, and then the other deck can't respond the way it's supposed to, then it's a blowout either way. And so I don't like that about this format. I do like the diversity that there has been so far in this format. I've been enjoying the way that people tech out decks, even when they are playing the more meta decks, the decks that are more common, the top tier. They're very rarely an extremely similar list. They always have a slightly different play style to each other, so I like that about this format. The Duelist Alliance format I just really liked because I think, aside from Cliff Orts, basically, all of the top tier decks seemed really skillful, and were not only really skillful, but required you to build your skill as you began playing them. So that's kind of, those are the things that I like and dislike about this format versus those ones. Dominic Milano asks about a certain Yugi tuber who shall not be named, who was talking about the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh! Skill is super, there is no skill in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or at least it doesn't take skill to top a YCS or whatnot. I don't want to give him any more support and publicity than he's ever even been getting. I'm not going to say his name because I don't think he deserves that recognition, but needless to say, I've talked about this before, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is definitely a game of skill. Of course, probability is involved, and whenever probability is involved, sometimes things don't go the way that you want them to, but because of law of large numbers, kind of, if you are playing a better deck, a more consistent deck, it is going to be going your way more often, and the better deck builder and the better player will win more often than the less good player. And sometimes players do, you know, accidentally show up to a YCS and do pretty successful and top it, but it is almost entirely good players and the best players who are topping YCSs. And so I'm not going to elaborate any more on that. I think that other YouTubers have done a greater job than I could do in this video, especially since I refuse to refer to his video specifically. I'm just going to move on from there. Destroyer831642 asks, "Hey, howdy RJ, if you were to create your own archetype from scratch, what kind of mechanics would you have in it? Also along those lines, do you know of a place which one can make their own cards / archetype?" I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh! Cardmaker.com is a thing that you can use. I've never been super happy with the results, but like, you can do it. That's a thing that you can do. I've considered, I've considered archetypes that I would personally make. If I were to make an archetype for myself. I've said this before, and there's somebody who comments on that I've wanted to make an interactive burn deck in the past, one which deals damage to your opponent through effects, but in ways that are necessarily interactive. So it's like, it is a balanced deck, but it's got that nudge into the tier 1 side of things by adding additional damage. Now, the Red Eyes deck kind of does that, but the Red Eyes deck also does not hold on to card advantage very easily. And so that is the kind of thing that I would create from scratch. RH Nisker asks, "Hello, Sir RJB. How did you personally get back into this game, coming from somebody who lost his lust for the duel?" I love this game. It's just, like, I know that a lot of people can't identify with this, but I even love the things that a lot of people don't like about this game. The broken mechanics and the tier 0 formats and the things like that. I basically love everything about this game except for certain parts of the community that I think are juvenile, that I think are not... They're not inclusive of certain sets of people who I feel like would really enjoy to play this game if people weren't asshats to them. There are certain things that I don't like about this game, but the other thing is I do love the community. I really enjoy the people that I've spoken to, that I've chosen to surround myself with in the community. I love the online community, and I love the game. It is... I enjoy competitive things that force me to build skill. I enjoy the interplay of being able to prepare for an event and being skillful in the moment. So you have to be skilled in your preparation and in your playing, and I love that combination of things. And also, I didn't want to start Magic because I've had a bad experience with Magic players, even more so than Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. And I also, like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards are the ones that I have around, and it's the community that I'm involved in, that I've played competitively, and so I really wanted to come back to the game for those reasons. And so I believe that is the last question for this week. Oh wow, my voice cracked there, big time. I have not been taking care of myself. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I am your host, the one, the only, the RJB0. If you liked this video, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why in the comment section below. Of course, subscribe for more decks, discussion, and general Yu-Gi-Oh! Analysis. Thank you all for watching. If you want to have your questions answered, leave them in the comment section below, and if I deem them good enough for a single video discussion this week, I will answer them in their own video. Otherwise, I will be trying to answer them during next Casual Friday. Thank you all for watching. I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0, and I got a jet. See you guys.